everyone. Welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a look at women and sexuality.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah, we've got this source here making some pretty bold claims.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so we're going to try to unpack some of those and see what we can learn.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so strap in because this first one kind of blew my mind. Apparently, research suggests that women think about their appearance an average of 10 times a day.
10.
10 times a day.
Yeah, I know we all check the mirror now and then, but 10 times.
That seems like a lot.
That feels like a lot to me.
It does,
Yeah.
yeah. But it's interesting because if we look beyond just the surface level, this statistic might not be about vanity so much as societal pressure.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's a study from the University of Central Florida that found that over 70% of women feel pressured to conform to these unrealistic beauty standards.
Wow, 70%.
Yeah, and that kind of constant messaging can definitely make you hyper aware of how you look. Yeah, for sure. That puts a whole new spin on those 10 glances in the mirror. It's less about do I look good and more about am I meeting these impossible standards?
Exactly. And that constant pressure can really take a toll on women's self-esteem and their body image.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so moving on from self-image to, intimacy itself. This source gets pretty explicit here.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and claims that certain acts like a man licking a woman's vagina and touching her nipples are sure signs he genuinely cares about her pleasure. I'm not sure I buy that direct correlation, but it does bring up the importance of foreplay, right?
Absolutely. While the wording in the source might be a bit, shall we say, direct, the underlying point about the importance of foreplay and clitoral stimulation is spot on.
Yeah.
For many women, this kind of focused attention is really essential for them achieving orgasm.
For sure. So it's less about specific acts and more about the intention behind them, prioritizing her pleasure and really understanding what feels good.
Precisely. And that ties into another claim from the source that 80% of women achieve orgasm through clitoral stimulation, not vaginal penetration.
Okay.
Which is a pretty important statistic to consider when we're talking about what truly leads to female pleasure.
You know, it's funny. We joke about the clitoris, the elusive butterfly, but it really is kind of wild how much misinformation is still out there about female orgasm. Like this whole idea that real orgasms only come from penetration.
Yeah, it's a myth that we need to keep debunking. The clitoris is the primary source of pleasure for most women, and understanding its anatomy is key.
Okay.
The clitoris actually extends internally and forms this wishbone-shaped structure. Stimulation of these internal branches during penetration can contribute to pleasure, but it's still the external clitoris that plays the dominant role in orgasm for most women.
So focusing on clitoral stimulation is kind of a non-negotiable for most women.
For most, yes. And that's why open communication and understanding is so important.
Absolutely. Speaking of open communication, I'm curious about this next part. The source shifts gears to talk about sexuality in older age groups, specifically the 50 to 60 range.
Okay.
It feels like we're finally starting to acknowledge that a fulfilling sex life isn't just for young people, right?
Absolutely. Healthy sexuality can continue throughout life. It's encouraging to see more open conversations about menopause and sexual health for older women. We're breaking down the taboo of even discussing these topics.
Yeah, it's about time. Okay, so we've talked about self-image, foreplay, the clitoris, and aging. Now, this source takes us into potentially uncharted territory for some listeners, anal sex.
Okay.
It's a topic that can be loaded with stigma and misinformation.
Yeah.
So I think approaching it with factual information and an emphasis on consent communication and safe practices is crucial.
Definitely. So how do we even start a conversation about this with a partner? It feels like a landmine sometimes.
Yeah.
It's all about creating a space where you both feel safe and comfortable, being open and honest. You might start by asking your partner how they feel about exploring different types of touch, or if they've ever been curious about anal play. And remember, it's okay to have boundaries and to say no if something doesn't feel right for you.
That's great advice. You know, it strikes me that this whole deep dive is really highlighting the importance of communication in relationships.
Yeah, it's a foundation of a healthy and fulfilling sexual connection.
For sure. Okay, I'm ready for a bit of a lighter note. This source offers some interesting tips for boosting female pleasure, like using socks.
Socks.
Yes, socks.
Interesting.
While some of these tips might be more anecdotal than scientifically proven, it's great to approach these things with a playful attitude, right? Experimentation can be fun as long as it's consensual and safe.
Exactly.
But I have to ask, is there any scientific basis to the sock thing?
You know, I haven't come across any research on that particular technique, but hey, I'm always open to learning new things.
Okay. All right, so maybe take that one with a grain of salt. But hey, if it works for you, no judgment here. So far, we've covered a lot of ground. I'm curious to see what other myths we can bust and what other insightful nuggets we can uncover as we continue this deep dive.
Let's do it.
All right, let's jump back in.
It seems like this source is just full of surprises.
What's next?
It claims that research shows a connection between women over 30 and a desire to experiment with anal sex.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm curious to unpack this one a bit further.
Yeah, that statement definitely raised an eyebrow for me, too. It feels a little like an overgeneralization, doesn't it?
It does. Reducing any group's sexual preferences to a single statement based on age is not only inaccurate, but potentially harmful.
Sexuality is incredibly diverse.
Yeah.
It's about individual preferences, not age-based stereotypes.
So true. And even within individual preferences, there's a whole spectrum of experiences and comfort levels.
Exactly. What's crucial is approaching any sexual activity, anal sex included, with open communication, respect, and a focus on mutual pleasure and consent. Well said. This source loves throwing around percentages.
Oh, yeah?
And this next one is a doozy: 60% of women between 45 and 60 fake orgasms with their partners.
Wow.
Wow, if that's true, that's a pretty alarming statistic.
It is significant, and it raises some important questions.
Mm-hmm.
Why might these women feel the need to fake it? Are they feeling pressured to perform?
Mm-hmm.
Are they uncomfortable communicating their needs and desires?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there a lack of understanding or effort on the part of their partners?
Right. It makes you wonder about the communication dynamics in those relationships. It really highlights the importance of having open and honest conversations about pleasure and what feels good.
Absolutely. And it speaks to the need for more education and open conversations about female pleasure and sexuality in general.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always about reaching a specific destination like orgasm. It's about the journey and enjoying the process together.
Okay, I have to ask about this next one. It's a bit out there. The source claims that the smell of pumpkins can boost blood circulation to the penis, fostering an erection. Is there any scientific backing to this?
That's a new one for me. While certain scents can have a psychological effect on arousal, I haven't come across any studies specifically linking pumpkin spice and erections. It likely falls into the realm of folklore or anecdotal evidence.
So maybe hold off on the pumpkin spice candles for your next romantic evening?
Probably a good idea. But it does bring up an interesting point about the power of the senses in sexual arousal. Smell, touch, sight, sound. They all play a role in creating a stimulating and sensual experience.
For sure. It's about creating an atmosphere, setting the mood, and enhancing that intimacy.
Exactly.
Now, this next claim is a bit more anatomical. The source says that the average vagina is 8 to 10 centimeters long, and therefore an average penis is enough to create satisfaction in women. What are your thoughts on that?
It's important to remember that size is not the only factor in sexual satisfaction for women. It goes back to technique, clitoral stimulation, and understanding what works for each individual.
Right. Focusing solely on size can actually detract from the experience and create unnecessary anxiety or pressure.
Exactly. It's about focusing on pleasure and connection, not measurements.
Well said. Okay. This next one is a sign of the times. 35% of people under 35 check their social networks immediately after having sex.
Oh, my.
Can we just enjoy the afterglow for a few minutes?
I know. It's a reflection of how connected we are to our devices. It's become almost second nature to check in, even after intimate moments.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to be mindful of how technology impacts our relationships and to really prioritize that real-life connection over digital distractions. Especially when it comes to intimacy, being present in the moment makes all the difference.
Couldn't agree more. It's about creating a space where you can truly connect with your partner without the intrusion of the outside world.
Okay, this next one is a bit more technical. The source says that squeezing the base of the penis can prevent ejaculation. Is there any truth to that?
There are techniques that can help delay ejaculation, and some involve applying pressure to certain areas, but they require more nuance than just squeezing. It's important to consult with a healthcare professional or a qualified sex therapist for guidance in this area.
Right. It's not about randomly applying pressure. It's about understanding the mechanics and finding what works safely and effectively.
Exactly. And again, communication and mutual consent are paramount in any sexual activity.
Always. Okay, last one from this section. The source states that 18% of women can achieve vaginal orgasms without any stimulation other than penetration, while 80% achieve orgasm through clitoral stimulation. What's your take on this?
This kind of circles back to the importance of the clitoris in female pleasure. While some women may experience pleasurable sensations from penetration alone, for most clitoral stimulation is key to achieving orgasm.
So this idea of the vaginal orgasm being the ultimate goal is kind of misleading?
It can be. It's important to move away from this hierarchical view of female orgasm and recognize the diversity of experiences and pathways to pleasure. Clitoral stimulation is a vital part of the equation for the vast majority of women.
And it's important to communicate that to partners and explore what feels good together.
Absolutely. Open communication, exploration, and a focus on mutual pleasure. Those are the key ingredients for a satisfying sexual experience.
I think that's a great note to transition to the final part of our deep dive. We've covered so much ground here, from anatomy and societal pressures to tips and techniques, but ultimately it all comes back to communication, respect, and a willingness to learn and grow together. Okay, so it feels like we've been handed this grab bag of facts about women and sexuality, and our job is to kind of sort through it all.
Right.
And figure out what's real and what's not, and hopefully walk away with a deeper understanding of this complex topic.
I love that analogy, grab bag of facts.
Yeah.
And like with any grab bag, there are bound to be some gems and some, well, the things that make you scratch your head.
Exactly. And sometimes it means really digging into those facts and seeing if they hold up under scrutiny. Like this next one, which claims that breathing deeply during sex can help delay ejaculation. Is there any truth to that?
You know, that's actually a technique that's often recommended in sex therapy.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The idea is that by focusing on your breath, you can stay present and mindful during sex, which can help you regulate your arousal levels and potentially delay ejaculation.
So it's not about holding your breath, but more about using your breath as a tool to manage your arousal.
That's right. It's about awareness and control.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be quite effective for some people.
Interesting. I'm always amazed by the mind-body connection and how it plays out in intimacy. Okay, shifting gears a bit, the source also mentions different positions being better for different situations, like doggy style being good for a downward curving penis or a smaller penis. Is there any validity to that?
Well, before we go any further, for anyone unfamiliar, doggy style is a position where, well, let's just say it involves one partner kneeling on all fours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as for whether certain positions are better for certain anatomies, you know, it's all about experimentation and finding what works best for you and your partner.
So it's less about following a rule book and more about discovering what feels good.
Absolutely.
Right.
Everybody's different, and what feels pleasurable for one couple might not for another.
Makes sense. It's like trying to fit everyone into a box when it comes to pleasure. It just doesn't work. Speaking of boxes, this source almost feels like a sex manual at times, with all its specific instructions. Like this one's short and deep movements are good for controlling ejaculation, while long and deep movements enhance arousal. Do people actually pay attention to this during sex?
You know, it's probably more helpful to think of these as general guidelines rather than strict rules.
Okay.
Sex is a very dynamic and fluid experience, and what works in one moment might not work in another.
So communication and being attuned to your partner's responses are key.
Exactly. Talk to each other, explore, and figure out what feels good together.
Sensing a theme here, communication. Okay, here's one that sparked my curiosity. The source claims that combining clitoral and anal stimulation at the same time can be highly pleasurable for women. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are definitely nerve endings in both areas that can create pleasurable sensations, and some women do enjoy this type of stimulation.
Yeah.
However, it's important to remember that everyone is different.
So what one person finds enjoyable, another might not.
Exactly. Individual preferences are everything, and open communication with your partner is crucial.
Consent and respect always come first. All right, last one from this source, and it's a bit of a head scratcher. It claims that a small penis is less than 12 centimeters, and a huge penis is anything over 17 centimeters. Who comes up with these arbitrary categories?
Well, it's a classic example of how societal norms and expectations try to define what's normal or desirable. Penis size varies widely, and there's no one-size-fits-all definition.
Another myth busted. What matters most is how you feel about your own body and how you use it to connect with your partner. Well, I think we've successfully dissected this, shall we say, unique source material.
Yeah, we have.
We've had some laughs, we learned some things, and hopefully come away with a more nuanced understanding of women and sexuality.
Absolutely. It's been a fascinating deep dive. And remember, the journey of sexual exploration and discovery is ongoing. Stay curious, stay open-minded, and above all, communicate with your partner.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of women and sexuality. Until next time, keep exploring.